Good morning, and my name is Peter Husey, and on behalf of the Mitchell Institute of the Air Force Association, the Reserve Officers Association, and the National Defense Industrial Association, welcome to this, the next in our series of Space Power Breakfasts for the Warfighter. I also want to recognize a number of our guests here today from Canada. Colonel Baird is here. Also from Austria, Brigadier General Harold Gollinger. I want to thank him for being here, and welcome. I also want to say hello to my dear friend from the Naval Academy, Professor Curtis, who is here with his lovely wife. I had a privilege of speaking to the honors students in the political science class before graduation at the Naval Academy, and if you ever have a chance to go speak at the Naval Academy, go, because it is one of the most beautiful venues, and it was extraordinary to see the 29 honor students going into flight school, reactor school. Some were going up to Rhode Island to go to school. Extraordinary group of men and women. I also want to say thank you to all our members of the armed services that are here today as well. For next week, we have 3 breakfasts. We have General Kowalski, who's on the 16th, General Todorov from MDA on the 18th, and Admiral Benedict, head of SSP, on the 19th. Our next space breakfast after this will be July 10th. We'll have Colonel John Antonin, who's going to talk about space innovation. And so if you haven't already signed up for any of these or would like to, please do so. I also want to acknowledge honored guest here today, former Governor of Virginia, James Gilmore, who, as you know, put together a series of reports on terrorism and the U.S. capability of dealing with it starting in 1999. Went through the year through December 2003. What I found fascinating was reading the ones prior to 9/11 and how perceptive the commission reports were. And Governor, thank you for being here. I also want to thank 2 people for which, without their help, the breakfast series would not be able to be conducted, and that is General Roger Teague from the Air Force, who has been one of our sponsors along with General Hyten, and also my friend Kath Ryan from Colorado Springs, who has been instrumental in putting this together as well. Our speaker today is Congressman Jim Bridenstine from Oklahoma. As you know, he is a member of the Space and Technology Committee. He is also a member of the House Armed Services Committee and spoke to our group, I believe, last year when General Hyten also spoke here. And he is going to talk to us about threats to our space assets, what the House and Senate Armed Services Committees are doing to deal with that, and then his own particular views on some of the things that he's going to be taking initiatives on. I also want to thank his staff, James Mazzol, for the help in putting this on. I want to also thank my sponsors who are here today. And with that, would you give a warm welcome to the Congressman from Oklahoma, Jim Bridenstine.
It's an honor to be here. If I hold this, is that going to work? Test 1, 2. Excellent. Now, is this microphone being used? Do I need to stay next to this microphone? Okay, so I'll stay close. All right. Well, thank you all for being here. It's a real honor and a pleasure. I have spoken to this group before with General Hyten. Had a great experience doing that. I've spent a lot of time with General Hyten, learning more about national security space. A lot of thank yous need to go out to this room, but of course General Teague has been very helpful. General Deptula, I understand General Deptula, was he here or couldn't come this morning? But a lot of folks in this room have been very helpful to me. I'm a Navy pilot by trade. I've not been a military space guy, but certainly the committees I'm on, the Science Committee, Subcommittee on Space now. But I also I chair the subcommittee on the environment, which we have a lot to do with NOAA. We oversee the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And of course, the Strategic Forces Subcommittee on the Armed Services Committee. So while I wasn't a space guy when I got here, I very quickly had to make myself into a space guy because things happened very rapidly. Some other thank yous. Peter, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you for inviting me for a second time. And it's an honor to be here and do this. A couple of other thank yous I think are important. I have a very good friend in the audience that I was not anticipating today, Michael D'Angelo. We have been through wars together in the private sector, I should say, and of course Bob. These two gentlemen are from Moon Express, and they are doing wonderful things on the commercial side of space that I think are critically important for our nation as well. And maybe I'll anchor here for just 1 second before I continue. We were involved not too long ago. Everybody in this room is probably aware. Dr. Peter Diamandis created a thing called the X Prize, $10 million reward for the first person who could get into space without any government assistance. You'd have to fly there twice in 1 week. And they successfully accomplished this with Spaceship One, as probably most people in this room are aware. And from that, people said, how do we continue to advance rocket science and space technology in the private sector apart from the whimsical budgets of politicians? And there was an organization that was formed called the Rocket Racing League, and I read about it in a magazine, and I got to know Michael D'Angelo through that process. And the Rocket Racing League took some really amazing technologies and was trying to again, advance rocket science outside the whimsical budgets of politicians. This, by the way, was long before I knew I was going to be one of those politicians creating the whimsical budgets that everybody in this room has challenges with. But ultimately, the business model was that of NASCAR. What if we were to raise revenue through ticket sales, merchandising, through television rights, video gaming, a whole host of different commercial ways to raise revenue, and then race rockets in a three-dimensional racetrack in the sky using technology that I flew with in the Navy, helmet-mounted virtual displays. Instead of targeting information, we'll put a virtual racetrack in the sky, if you can imagine that. So one pilot would be flying through circles, another pilot would be flying through squares, another pilot would be flying through pentagons, you name your shape. By the way, any one of those shapes could be a corporate sponsor. Maybe it could be the arches of McDonald's that we're flying through. I mean, you pick it. But ultimately, we put this together, and the technologies came together. We did a big event. I used to run the Tulsa Air and Space Museum in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And Michael D'Angelo and his team from the Rocket Racing League came, and we did a big air show. 40,000 people came to it. We called it the Tulsa Air and Rocket Racing Show. 40,000 people came. We created a traffic jam at this little airport in Tulsa that went back 20 miles. Put in jeopardy any future political career I might have had, may I say. But the public interest in this was astonishing. And we put together, Michael being in charge of the technology piece, we put together this racetrack in the sky for the first time at the air show, which was a big risk, but we did it. And people saw us fly aircraft through a three-dimensional racetrack in the sky where the pilots could maintain close proximity and at the same time safe separation. It was also the first time in American history when rockets, literally rockets, one built by X-Corps, one built by Armadillo Aerospace, flew in formation. And that was done at the Tulsa Air and Space Museum. And what an honor it is I wasn't expecting you to be here, but thank you for coming. And Bob, thank you for coming. And your Moon Express organization is fantastic. They're now competing for the next X Prize, which is fantastic as well. Governor Jim Gilmore, good friend of mine. Governor Jim Gilmore, former governor of Virginia, has spent time in my district in Oklahoma, getting to know my constituents. And of course, I'm not making any endorsements today. But what I will say is that if Governor Jim Gilmore were to be the commander-in-chief, America would be in very good hands. So thank you for being here as well, and it's an honor that you chose to come. So I'll quit reminiscing here, and I'll start talking about some of the things that we're up against. So I've mentioned I was a Navy pilot. I flew E-2 Hawkeyes initially in the United States Navy on active duty. I eventually transitioned to the F-18 Hornet. I flew Red Air at Top Gun. My job was to study how the enemies of America fly and then fly those enemy profiles in an effort to get shot down by Top Gun instructors. And I got shot down a lot because I was an E-2 guy flying an F-18. But if I got shot down, that meant things were going well. So that was not a terrible thing. But back then, we dealt a lot with space. I just wasn't terribly involved in how it all worked. We had the I believe button, and those in this room that are in the military that fly airplanes also probably have an I believe button. You flip the switch and it works, and you're grateful that it works. And if it doesn't work, it is an anomaly. Why isn't this working? There's something technologically wrong with it. Maybe it's SATCOM, maybe it's GPS. Pick your space system. At the end of the day, we are no longer in an era where when something doesn't work, it is an anomaly. We are now living in an era where space is contested, it is hostile, and it is congested. It could be that it is not an anomaly, but that it is a threat. The question is, what is the intent? Maybe it's hostile intent. Maybe it's a hostile act. How do we respond? What is our doctrine? What are the rules of engagement when these kind of activities occur? How do we as a country respond? When I flew in the United States Navy, this was not of terrible concern. I left active duty in 2007. I went into the reserves. I did counter-drug operations in the E-2 Hawkeye. Down in Central and South America, it wasn't a terrible concern down there either. I'm now going to be flying in the Oklahoma Air National Guard. I'll be flying an MC-12. This is an aircraft that takes advantage of commercial capabilities as it relates to space communications. And this is going to be an issue because the places where the MC-12 goes, there could be a contested space environment. You can get that. So the question is this: how do we in Congress help the Department of Defense achieve its objectives? We have heard from the Chinese that they have identified what they would say our, quote, Achilles heel. Those are their words in open source documents. They have identified what they call America's soft ribs. Those are their words in open source documents. That's what they're calling space for the United States of America. And I am here to tell you that your United States Congress is not going to accept that. That when it comes to fighting wars, we are not going to allow anybody to have a technological advantage in space. And your Congress is committed to that. And I can tell you, even the executive branch is committed to that. We have seen the budget request come from the executive branch, and that budget request has been backed up by your United States Congress. Everybody seems to be on the same page with this. So the number one concern that I have going forward as it relates to making sure that we have the ability to defend this country in space, which is absolutely necessary, is making sure that we fund things appropriately. And I'm going to tell you what I'm terribly concerned with right now, especially today. Yesterday, the House of Representatives passed the Defense Appropriation Bill. A couple of weeks ago, we passed the National Defense Authorization Act. Your Congress has done what is necessary to secure this country, and we have plussed up defense, especially as it relates to space. We have done that. We are now hearing from the President, and I'm sorry, but you asked a politician to come speak, so I'm going to speak truthfully. We're now hearing the President suggest that he's going to veto the National Defense Authorization Act. We're hearing the President say that he's going to veto the Defense Appropriations Bill. We're hearing Harry Reid say that he's going to filibuster the National Defense Authorization Act, and in fact, he called it a waste of time. He also said that he's going to filibuster all appropriation bills, including the Defense Appropriation Bill. What does this mean? This means we are headed for another government shutdown, and this means that Harry Reid is making it happen. This is not appropriate given the condition that we face in this country. And to say that we're going to veto or filibuster the NDAA or the Defense Appropriation Bill because they're not happy about how much money they're getting for the IRS or the EPA or the National Endowment for the Arts to hold defense hostage for these kind of activities is indefensible in today's national security environment. And I'm saying that emphatically because it is true. This is an indefensible position. Nobody should hold the Department of Defense hostage for some kind of additional social welfare program that currently is not, in the Budget Control Act. And that's important that I hope everybody in this room understands. You do not hold defense hostage for other programs. I've said all I'm going to say on that. I think, I can talk about the threats and the missions and how we're being overwhelmed right now and under this Budget Control Act and the sequester. I used to fly counter-drug operations in the United States Navy. My squadron, we used to bust $2 billion worth of cocaine every year on the high seas. VAW-77, the world-famous night wolves, if I may say so myself. My squadron is eliminated. It doesn't exist anymore. That means $2 billion worth of cocaine is coming into our country, and $2 billion worth of cash is funding transnational criminal organizations in Central and South America, as well as in northern Mexico. The sequester is problematic. When I campaigned for the United States Congress, I said we need to unwind the defense sequester. I'm not concerned about everything else, but when it comes to national security, we don't put things in jeopardy so that we can argue about the National Endowment for the Arts. So what I will tell you is that our missions are being overwhelmed right now by the lack of resources. And what we did in the House of Representatives is plus up those resources with overseas contingency operations. We have, in essence, unwound the defense sequester for 1 year. And, of course, this is what I campaigned on and what is within holding of the American value system. I will also say that when we talk about space, it's not just about space. We're talking about information dominance. The Chinese, we have seen over and over again, their goal is information dominance. It wasn't too long ago that they hacked the National Weather System in open source documents. And I say they. This was Chairman Wolf at the time who was putting this out in open source documents. I have not confirmed where the jamming or where the hacking came from. But at the time, Chairman Wolf was saying it was the Chinese. I have no reason to disagree with that. At the end of the day, it forced us to shut down some NOAA satellites. Information dominance is the goal here. When I talk about information dominance, it's not just about space, it's also about cybersecurity. So the United States of America needs to be every bit as strong when it comes to cybersecurity as we are in space. Couple of things. I'm going to talk about some congressional actions that I have taken, some other congressional actions that need to be taken. In 2017, we're going to have a wideband analysis of alternatives. And this is going to be an important document because from that, we're going to create a space-based communications architecture that will last for many, many years. This is going to happen in 2017, the analysis of alternatives. The question is, what we have to do as members of Congress is make sure that the Department of Defense has the information it needs in order to make the right recommendations in that analysis of alternatives. Part of that process means we, as members of Congress, we need to fund the Space Modernization Initiative. We need to fund the Protected Tactical Waveform, the Protected Tactical Testbed. We need to fund these programs. Interestingly, just a few days ago in the Defense Appropriation Bill, the Space Modernization Initiative, which is for advanced, extremely high-frequency AEHF satellites, that got zeroed out in the Defense Appropriation Bill. And I went to the floor of the House of Representatives and argued on behalf of making sure that funding got put back in. Because we've got to have protected tactical waveform. It is part of the architecture that will result in more resilience. We need distribution of our network systems. We need, in some cases, disaggregation. Not in all cases, but in some cases, we need disaggregation. We need this kind of resilience built into the system. Well, how do you do that? Well, let's take advantage of the global architecture of space-based communications that already exists. How do you do that? We need a new waveform. We need a waveform that can travel through a bent pipe. We need to be taking advantage of all, many companies in this room, quite frankly, are represented, or many companies are represented in this room that have created this global architecture in space. We need to take advantage of that. In order to take advantage of that, we've got to change the way we do acquisitions, but we also have to have a waveform that can travel through those assets that are currently in space. So when you think about the wideband analysis of alternatives, if we don't fund the Space Modernization Initiative to include protected tactical waveform, and I understand the appropriate, they said, look, that shouldn't be taken out of AEHF. And I agree with that assessment. But what you don't do is zero out the account. You got to find where the money's going to come from. Because this is a critically important program. If we're going to get an analysis of alternatives that is going to define our architecture for the next decade or two, we've got to make sure that we're funding these programs. We've got to fund protected tactical waveform. We also have to fund the Pathfinder program. That came under risk as well. By the way, on the protected tactical waveform, on the Senate side, the Senate appropriations, that got funded. So my goal now is to make sure that when it goes to conference, that at the end we come out on top on that. And I think we're going to be in a good position to do that because the Senate has spoken. And they not only funded it, but they actually plussed it up in addition to funding it, which is a very positive development. I mean, somebody over there is very serious, and we just found this out recently, so we're working to find out who over there is doing that. We're going to do what we can to protect that. And again, if we need to move it out of AEHF, I support that. But we need to have the protected tactical waveform, so again, we can take advantage of the global architecture in space for communications. The Pathfinder program also needs to be funded. The idea here is we have challenges with the acquisition process where, on one hand, you've got SMC that has to purchase the hardware, the satellites themselves, and on the other hand, you've got DISA that leases satellite capacity on the spot market based on the needs of the commanders in the battle space. And I want to make sure everybody here understands. I want to make sure that the commanders in the battle space have the bandwidth they need, when they need it, where they need it. Nobody wants to put that in jeopardy. But we come to a position where we don't have, in essence, the architecture necessary that takes advantage of both commercial, which DISA purchases from commercial, they lease from commercial, and SMC builds government-owned and operated satellites. This creates a discrepancy. And I'm preaching to the choir. I know people in this room understand this. But on the defense side of things, we use Ka band and we use X band. On the commercial side of things, we use C band and Ku band, and of course other bands as far as the other than the wide band. This creates a discrepancy where it is absolutely true that I've been in situations where we needed to have SATCOM and we didn't have the right terminal for the right satellite that's in space. That happens because the architecture is not integrated between commercial and military. We need to continue to advance the architecture. That requires us to move forward with the Pathfinder program. And as we move forward with and for those in the room who aren't familiar, the Pathfinder program says is we're going to start by buying a commercial transponder. The U.S. government will buy a commercial transponder and then exchange that commercial transponder for global access to a global architecture. That's a critically important acquisition development, because that gives us the ability to purchase a piece of hardware. For acquisitions, you have to buy hardware. You can't lease. So for acquisitions, now we own a piece of hardware, but then we can exchange it for access to a global constellation that could even go well beyond 1 year, which is what DISA is currently limited to. So I would attest that we have to have the Pathfinder program funded as well. That came under threat. We got that put back into the National Defense Authorization Act, and it looks like the Senate is going to follow that as well. Again, the goal is a unified architecture. I also put a provision in the bill that said by 2017 the Department of Defense has to pick, if we're going to have a single architecture, who is the acquisition agent for that single architecture? If we're going to use commercial and military, who is going to be the architect? Who is going to be purchased? Who is going to be the single acquisition agent for that integration? And we required that the DoD come up with who that person might be by 2017. Interestingly, the Senate took it a step further, which I was glad to see. They said by 2016, they have decided it's going to be SMC, the Space and Missile Systems Center, is going to be identified as that single. They've identified it as that single acquisition agent in 2016. Now, I don't know what's going to come out of conference when those two things come together, but here's the important point. Your Congress is interested in seeing an architecture that is integrated, because here's the deal, and I think people in this room understand this. We are seeing right now commercial advancements with gigabits per second, the throughput, advancing very, very rapidly in the commercial sector. We're talking about satellites being launched, a couple of years ago that had 7 gigabits per second. Now we've got satellites being launched at 140 gigabits per second. Next year we're going to have satellites being launched at multiple hundreds of gigabits per second in the commercial sector. Well, where are we on the defense side of things? 20 gigabits per second. And if we go through an analysis of alternatives and then we go through an acquisition process, we're talking about satellites that will again be obsolete by the time we launch them. That's why it's so important that we fund the Pathfinder program, that we fund the protected tactical waveform. So at the end of the day, when we do this analysis of alternatives, the Department of Defense will have the information it needs to actually make the decision that we can integrate commercial and military to get the warfighter the gigabits that the warfighter needs when they need it and where they need it. That's ultimately, there is an architecture in space that currently exists, and we're not fully taking advantage of it. And to the extent that we do, it costs too much money. There's a way we can do this better. So I talked about the integrated architecture. We put a provision in the bill. I chair the subcommittee on the environment within the Science, Space, and Technology Committee. We have had challenges with some of the satellites that NOAA has been producing. I want to be clear. I have to say this every time because people get mad at me. I want to be clear. I come from Oklahoma. We have a lot of tornadoes in Oklahoma. When it comes to the GOES program or the JPSS program, I do not want those programs to go away. 80% of the data that feeds our data assimilation systems and our numerical weather models comes from these satellites in space that are government owned and government operated. I don't want those programs to go away. However, when we think about the future architecture for weather data that feed the data assimilation system and the numerical weather models, that architecture should consider, again, the rapid advancements in commercial industry that the government is not keeping up with. I'm talking about things like GPS radio occultation data, hyperspectral data. These are capabilities that the private sector has now. They're going to launch satellites into space, and at the end of the day, the data that they have can feed our numerical weather models, if only we're willing to buy the data. I think this is critically important. We put a provision in the National Defense Authorization Act, since I sit on both committees, that requires the Department of Defense to give us a report on what kind of data might be available from the commercial sector to help weather forecasting in the Department of Defense. Obviously, we've had challenges over the Indian Ocean and some of the persistent cloud characterization that we need in the Middle East. And of course, we need to make sure that we're funding what is necessary to get us that cloud characterization. Now, been a big debate over whether we launch DMSP-20 or whether we don't launch DMSP-20. And what I will say is that Congress has an interest in making sure that we do the right thing here. Maybe sometimes the department has not liked how we have weighed in on this issue. But I just hope everybody understands cloud characterization over the Middle East is absolutely critical when it comes to ordnance delivery. And I think people in this room understand that. When it comes to the integration of commercial and military, government-owned and operated satellites and commercial satellites, I think there's another development that's happening that's important, and that's what's happening at the JSPOC with JMS, the mission system for the JSPOC. We're seeing right now an integration with the commercial integration cell. You guys had General Raymond here not too long. I'm sure he talked about this. But the idea here is when it comes to figuring out what the anomalies might be and determining whether or not those anomalies, whether it's maybe electromagnetic interference or even some kind of hostile activity in space, when it comes to these kind of things, the JSPOC is critically important. The commercial industry has a lot to offer, and now there's an integration cell, a commercial integration cell inside the JSPOC for space situational awareness and electromagnetic interference. And what we're seeing, again, this ties back to my time in the Navy. If there was some kind of sensor on the ground that was targeting an aircraft in the sky, how do you identify the location of that sensor? Well, you can triangulate it, more assets, more better. You got to have more assets, and eventually you can triangulate and geolocate and ultimately defeat that threat. That's why it's important to have the commercial integration piece, because more assets giving us better information on not only characterization of what that threat or anomaly might be, but also the AEH or the geolocation of that. The commercial integration cell happening at the JSPOC, I think, is critically important, even as we go forward with trying to integrate commercial and military architectures in space. I'm going to stop talking for now. I'll just open it up for questions if that's okay. And certainly, is there somebody that I'll just, okay. So you want to clap for me? You can do that. More questions? There's got to be questions. Thoughts, concerns? Do you want to yell at me? Yes, sir.
What are your thoughts about Chinese intentions? There's this conflict about whether or not they're an actual 21st century partner because of our economics, or whether they're a military threat to the United States in Asia. What are their intentions? What are they trying to do?
The question Governor Gilmore has are the intentions of the Chinese. Are they a partner as it relates to commerce? Are they a partner, or are they a threat given their intentions? And what I'll tell you is both. We actually partner with them as it relates to trade in major ways on one hand. On the other hand, we see hostile intention all over the place. You look at the East China Sea, the Senkaku Islands, the establishment of an air defense identification zone over the Senkaku Islands, the South China Sea, where they're now claiming territory that clearly doesn't belong to them, and of course they're taking control over fisheries, and they're taking control over energy resources in the South China Sea. And in fact, the Great Wall of Sand, as many people are probably familiar with, where they're building islands in the South China Sea, the Spratlys. Now they're weaponizing those islands. This is not territory that belongs to them by any international measure whatsoever. This is threatening, of course, to countries like Vietnam or the Philippines, Malaysia. And so on one hand, we're seeing that the Chinese are partners when it comes to trading. On the other hand, we're seeing that they are very aggressive in pursuing their interests. And to the extent that the international community does not come together and create, some kind of unified effort, they are going to take advantage of strategic ambiguity. As long as there's no international treaties as it relates to the South China Sea, they're going to take advantage of this strategic ambiguity. They're going to do whatever it is they want to do. And eventually they're going to have so much might and so much power that nobody can do anything about it. I think they've got a lot of people that they have to feed, and because of that, they're confiscating resources that don't belong to them, and that should concern all of us, because that is not what people who want to be part of the international community do. So I would say that on the one hand, they are trading partners. On the other hand, they're not necessarily on our side. Yes, sir.
Congressman Sidney Friedberg, BreakingDefense.com. You went through a wide range of things that you're concerned about. Let me ask, if you could sort of rack and stack, what is your to-do list between now and the passage, God willing, final passage of NDAA and the Defense Appropriations Bill? What are the things in the space realm? Obviously, there's the whole wider debate over sequester and OCO that no one here in this room will ultimately solve. But what are the things in the space domain that you want to make sure are in those bills?
Great question. Question is, what are the things that I want to make sure, my to-do list, if you will, when it comes to defense appropriations and defense authorization? I will say, number one, we need to make sure that protected tactical waveform is funded. Whether that's in the AEHF program or it's moved somewhere else, I am committed to doing whatever it is I can do to get that program funded. If we're going to have commercial integration, we've got to have that capability. So I would say that's number one. On the other hand, I would say number two would be uh, probably the Pathfinder Program, to make sure that we are considering different acquisition options. Right now, the idea, I got Pathfinder 2 funded in the NDAA, and it looks like the Senate is going to follow suit because the President's budget request zeroed that out. So Pathfinder 2 is critically important. Pathfinder 2 is buying a commercial transponder and then translating that into access to a global architecture of space-based communications. Now that has been funded in the NDAA, and it will be funded in the Defense Appropriation Bill as well. And we need to look at Pathfinder 3 and Pathfinder 4, where eventually we're getting to the point where we're purchasing a commercial satellite. The DoD will own a commercial satellite and then transfer that satellite for global access to basically mobile global communications. And so that's important too, but that's not going to be funded in this Defense Appropriation Bill. But ultimately the idea here is we need to, as a country, move to a day where instead of buying megahertz, which is just bandwidth, we need to move to a day where we're buying throughput, gigabits per second. If we're going to do the right thing for the taxpayer and the right thing for the warfighter, we need to buy gigabits per second of throughput. What is the cost per gigabit per second rather than just buying hertz? Does that make sense? And so that's what the Pathfinder is all about. And when you get to Pathfinder 4 and Pathfinder 5, you're looking at moving us in that direction. So Pathfinder and a protected tactical waveform.
And on Pathfinder, the buying of the commercial transponder or someday a whole satellite, that's basically almost like an accounting gimmick to allow the acquisition system to even do this.
You can call it a gimmick. I would call it innovative. And I'll tell you why.
But you don't actually use the transponder. You just say, we buy this, now we give this back to you and exchange for stuff.
So we have some acquisition issues, right? When it comes to, if we need access to that commercial architecture, we have to lease it because all that money is OCO money. We lease it on the spot market for 1 year at the most because it's OCO money. We don't know if we're going to have it next year. And when I say OCO, that for those in the room, that's Overseas Contingency Operations money. We don't know if we're going to have that next year. So when we lease it on the spot market from commercial industry, we're leasing it for 1 year. We can't do multi-year leases in that capacity. So one of the innovative ways to do this is say, okay, if the acquisition rules say that we have to buy hardware, we can't lease on the spot market, we have to buy hardware, let's buy a piece of hardware and then trade it for acquisition to a global architecture that could last more than 1 year. If we can't get the appropriate laws passed to give us multi-year procurement, then let's create innovative ways to make it happen. And that's ultimately what I think. Here's the thing, I'm going to tell you this is an important point. Whatever it takes to get the warfighter what the warfighter needs when the warfighter needs it, I as a member of Congress will support that.
Can you give us your thoughts and the will of Congress with respect to competitive space launch and qualification of new entrants and new engines, all related subjects?
That's boy. Who's in the room? The question was about the EELV program, and of course we've got this big competition between ULA and SpaceX. A couple of things. I'll tell you my position is this. Number one, anybody who is advocating to me on some kind of government position that will make one of the two competitors a monopoly, that's not going to go well with me. We need assured access to space. We need multiple competitors. We need multiple ways to get into space. I've spent time with General Teague and General Hyten, and I have heard, this was before my time. I was in fifth grade when the Space Shuttle Challenger blew up. But at that time, we lost access to space for a period of years. We cannot put ourselves, given the threats that we face today, we cannot put ourselves in that position. We need assured access to space. We need multiple paths to get there. And when somebody comes and lobbies me for a position that will make them the sole source provider and eliminate the competition, that's going to fall on deaf ears. And it looks like that has fallen on deaf ears in Congress, and it has fallen on deaf ears in the administration. And that is a good thing. I will also say that both sides do it. Neither one of them is innocent in this. But at the same time, my goal is to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That's what I'm sworn to do. That means I've got to make sure we've got assured access to space. As it relates to the RD-180 engine, I'm all in favor of making sure that we have a domestic engine capacity. Critically important. Does that mean that we should restrict our ability to have access to space? And the answer to that, in my opinion, is no. And I think what you've seen from both the House and the Senate now is a willingness to say, okay, we're not gonna damage ourselves in order to prove a point. And I think that's an important position that we're now seeing from all parties at this point. I will also say that when you look at some of the new entrants, potential new entrants, you've got the AR-1 engine, which I think is a great capability, and Aerojet Rocketdyne has now created a consortium of companies that are looking at maybe purchasing the rights to the Atlas V, which would create potentially a third market competitor. And I don't know what the outcome of that will be. I don't know if people in the room might have more inside information than me or not. But I think that's a good idea. We need more competition. And I will also say this, when I talk about more competition, it is not the role of the government to take our assured access to space and put companies out of business. That would be damaging in itself too. Now, so these are just some of my overarching concerns. SpaceX can create their own engine, and ULA can rely on the BE-4 from Blue Origin. All of these things, I think, are good. They allow the EELV competitors to have the space they need to compete. But certainly, I'm not opposed to more competition, and it is not our job to put certain companies out of business. So. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, sir. Courtney Albin from Inside the Air Force. I have a question about SBIRs. There was a provision in the House Appropriations Bill that would shift funding from SBIRs into OCO, SBIRs being a missile defense capability, and the justification or the validation or whatever was for counterterrorism reasons. I guess I wonder, as an authorizer, do you think that there are grounds for characterizing SBIRs as a counterterrorism asset versus a when it's kind of always been classified as missile defense, and what are the grounds there that you would offer?
That's a great question. When you think about SBIRs, we're talking about a staring capability with broad aperture, which is a good thing. I will tell you, I read in Aviation Week and Space Technology that, and I read this in an open source document, probably a competitor of yours. But it talked about delving down and being able to see, things more localized. I haven't seen it myself, but I read that in Aviation Week and Space Technology. So it would appear that there is potentially some good counterterrorism opportunities there. Yes, sir.
Yes, you talked a lot about the use of commercial, and to the extent that commercial services are available to our enemies, that creates a level playing field. What are your thoughts on the balance of the use of commercial and unique capabilities that might give us an edge?
So the question is about the level playing field with our adversaries, our enemies, our competitors. Once the commercial realm is available, they could take advantage of it as well. The answer to that is absolutely they could. It is also true that if they do and we don't, we lose. So we need to take advantage of it. What I would tell you is as we enter into contracts, we need to get ahead of this and make sure that the contracts favor us. That needs to happen. And certainly we have that leverage and we have that power, and we need to do it. So.
Jim, thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you guys so much.
I'm going to keep you for about another 50 seconds.